Spirit of life, God of love, how long can we live with the pain of not knowing what to do? How long will we use complexity as an excuse to do nothing? When will we stop letting analysis and cynicism paralyze and demoralize us? Eternal Spirit of hope, from time to time you present us with someone who speaks a simple truth. People who have food, shelter, and healing medicine must learn to share. That is all. God of love, guide us to the knowledge that moves our inert hands to action. Show us how to use them to build a future of hope. Amen. Opening words this morning from Stephen Schick. As Unitarians, we gather seeking truth, meaning, love, and deep connection. We always allow for wisdom from a range of religious sources and secular sources. We have shared values, but treasure too individual beliefs, encouraging all in their expression of lifelong spiritual experience and development. We light our chalice, a ritual that connects us to Unitarians around the world. We gather as Unitarians, old and new friends seeking truth, love, meaning, and deep connection. We gather, yes, with shared values, with individual beliefs. We respect the integrity of our individual selves, even as we are shown the interconnectedness of all that is. Even as things around us feel strange and extreme, we search for hope and joy and the sense of feeling fully alive. We light this chalice, the symbol of our open, creedless faith for holding and being held. A short reading from Forest Church. Imagine awakening one morning from a deep and dreamless sleep to find yourself in the nave of a vast cathedral. Like a child newborn, untutored, save to moisture, nurture, rhythm, and the profound comforts at the heart of darkness, you open your eyes into a world unseen, indeed unimaginable before. It's a world of light and dancing shadow, stone and glass, life and death. This second birth, at once miraculous and natural, is in some ways not unlike the first, a new awakening. Such awakenings may happen only once in a lifetime or many times, but when they do, what before you took for granted is presented as a gift, difficult yet precious and good. Not that you know what to do with your gift, or even what it really means, only how much it matters. Awakening to the call stirring deep within you. The call of life itself, the call of God, if you will, and you begin your pilgrimage. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Hutchinson, minister here in Cheltenham and Gloucester, and also for the Cotswold Group. And today's theme is pilgrimage in the pandemic. There are some silences and period of reflection, but it's very much a sense of a journey today. We'll examine the pilgrimage of reading, the pilgrimage of movement or travel, the pilgrimage of social media, if I may offer it to you, the pilgrimage of our relationship to the eternal, or that feeling of connecting outside ourselves, and the pilgrimage of reflecting inside, and hopefully the pilgrimage of bringing it all together. I begin with sharing a story that I have read a couple of times this week, but it felt right for this morning. This is an Anthony de Mello story, The World Fair of Religions. My friend and I went to the fair, the World Fair of Religions. It was not a trade fair, but the competition was fierce. The propaganda was loud. At the Jewish store, we were given handouts that said that God was all compassionate and the Jews were his chosen people. The Jews, no other people were chosen as they. At the Muslim store, we learned that God was all merciful and Muhammad, peace be upon him, his only prophet. Salvation comes from listening to God's prophet. At the Christian store, we discovered that God is love and there is no salvation outside the church. Join the church or risk eternal damnation. On the way out, I asked my friend, "What do you think of God?" And my friend replied, "He's bigoted, he's fanatical, he's cruel." Back home, I said to God, how do you put up with this sort of thing, Lord? Don't you see they've been giving you a bad name for centuries? God said, "It wasn't I who organised the fair. In fact, I'd be too ashamed to visit it." Anthony de Mello's story, The World Fair of Religions. And I chose perhaps some may think a little silly story to highlight the pilgrimage of reading, that you can take a story and then you can invite yourself into a process of questions about that story or short reading. What is happening in the story? Where are we in the story? Well, that story was a story of a world religions fair, and somebody was visiting it. What images and stories and songs does that show for you? Is the next question. And for me, that kind of reminded me of my past, where I was associated with possibly that description of Christianity and the church that was in that story. It brought up those feelings for me, and it may have brought up something different for you. What experiences have you had in your life that come to mind? The next one is the next question. And for me, that reminds me of one of my favourite songs, which is, for those of you of a similar age to myself and musical inclination, from Jethro Tull, which, when talking about God, he uses the phrase, "He's not the kind you wind up on Sundays." And so the end of that story reminds me of that statement. He's not the kind you wind up on Sunday. And what action am I being called to take? I will come back to that final question later in the service. So the pilgrimage of reading can apply to a short and simple story such as that, and any that you choose to look at, where you can ask what's happening in the story, what images and stories does it create for you, and what from your own life comes to mind, and what action are you being invited to take? One pilgrimage that's here for us today and every day is our relationship to the divine, or an energy we don't understand, great spirit, eternal mystery. And so let's have a short reflection and connection to that eternal mystery. The first reading is from the Tao Te Ching. There'll be a pause, a listening prayer from Kay Lindell follows with a pause. Something undefined and yet complete was born before heaven and earth, silent and boundless, existing alone and forever unchanged, pervading over all without fail. She may be considered mother of all under heaven. I know not her name. I call her the Tao, and in the absence of knowledge, I name her the Great. A listening prayer. So now I listen for nuances. When we hear each person's unique voice, we can better see their place as diverse individuals contributing to the whole. This is what we can create together when we listen deeply. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe, just maybe, we had a moment of listening deeply. I do love that phrase, and in the absence of knowledge, I name her the Great. And for many, on the face of it, there is no relationship with that is outside of ourselves, that some people choose to call God. They are adamant, vehement maybe, in their commitment to the lack of commitment in that direction. But I chose a very short quote from Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, Love in the Time of Cholera, to demonstrate that connection, no matter how hard we try, is in and around so many people. And the quote is this: "I don't believe in God, but I'm afraid of him." Strange, isn't it, that this character, whose name I haven't actually written down on my notes, was quite adamant in not believing, but at the same time being scared. But love, the title is in the name of that book, love is the spiritual connection that welds us all together and welds all of those religions that attend the fair of world religion. It is love that holds us. And so I invite you to sing of that experience now. Love will guide us. Always think it's a good idea to give yourself a round of applause from time to time. Excellent singing all round. Well done. So I had quite an interesting little pilgrimage as I prepared for this service. So I keep all my notes on Evernote, and so I will search to see what appears. So this is all my writing for worship, but lots of other stuff that I just gather. And I found this piece that I wrote myself when, in fact, Sam and I went to Transylvania 5 or 6 years ago, entitled Holiday or Pilgrimage, ? And so I'd like to just share a little bit of this, if it's not going to make you feel too miserable at the idea that we're pretty unlikely to go to anywhere just right now. So we went to Brasov first, arriving on an overnight sleeper from Budapest at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. The things that you do to save money, of course. And the Brasov train station was, well, underwhelming would be an understatement. It was quite drab and everything. And so we got the bus into the centre, not sure what we were going to expect, but nothing prepared us for the chitty chitty bang bang like style of the centre of Brasov, with painted houses nestled in amongst hills that were just tall enough to surround the town, and really, really green. And so we then had to find somewhere to put our bags and try and find the Brasov Unitarian congregation, which was where we were heading. And so we arrived just in time as the service was beginning. Some pilgrimages are just in time. And we walked in to a congregation of 250 and quietly sat at the back. I'm looking at the screen here thinking, we're a bit shy today, but hey, what I didn't know was that it was one of the 4 communion services of the year for the Brasov congregation. So we were treated to communion, and the minister hunted us out afterwards because the whisper had got around, there's some English folks here, and we went and had a coffee afterwards, and it was wonderful. I asked him about the communion, and I always remember him saying, well, we don't really actually know how much of the Bible's true, but we do know what parts mean to us, and we know our traditions. And although I was experiencing a style of service way, way away from my own personal preference, it was actually really joyful. We then travelled through up to Cluj to go and see the place where the Edict of Torda was proclaimed, and Francis David's church, which is back to Catholic. We came back through Transylvania over the Carpathian Mountains, where I wrote a piece called Green Meditation, which I've shared with you previously. And that whole process was a great experience. And of course, we had to have a pilgrimage for Dracula while we were there. And I learnt what I didn't know. I knew that the stake through the heart and Dracula, of course, but what I didn't know was that was put through, and then the person was effectively upended and crucified, was the method of killing, which was obviously horrible. So this travelling and pilgrimaging are very mixed together in our lives. They're very mixed together in our heads at the moment, because whatever our version of travel is, whether it's a bus to another town or to Transylvania or to visit family or friends, we're all unable to achieve this. I'm hesitating to say the words the pilgrimage of social media, but I feel I have to say those phrases. First, a plug from Kevin's email to the link to this service. The Facebook page is now operational on the website, so you do not need to go and look at Facebook or join Facebook at all, but you can go on that link and scroll down. And if you are so inclined, you will find some of the Facebook live reflections that I've been doing, as well as various things that are posted, and Kevin's blog, and etc., etc. So give it a try. Give it a try. I'd like to give you a flavour of my relationship with social media, or with the things that we are doing, and how it's changed this last 9 months during the pandemic. As you all know, I run a couple of gatherings regularly each week, Heart and Soul and Touching the Spirit, and some of you have been to them. In my mind, they are 2 separate things. They are what Heart and Soul is a very prayerful rhythm, the same rhythm at each time. Touching the Spirit is more thinking and wordy. And I've viewed them as 2 separate things. I realized there was a number of people that I wasn't connecting to. And so I started the Facebook Live Thursday evening reflections and discovered that I could connect to a number of people that I didn't do previously. And in the absence of in situ worship or the ability to offer Zoom worship for the Evesham congregation, I started to do Facebook Live on a Sunday morning when I was due at Evesham. For those of you who've done Facebook Live, actually doing it's quite an eerie feeling, because you're obviously speaking to a screen as I am now, but without the benefit of your lovely faces in front of me. But you do have this little thing in the top corner that tells you how many people are watching. And that's quite nice, you know, if it goes like 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's not great when it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So I've had to learn to be okay when it's 0. But it doesn't stop me getting quite pleased when the 3, 4, 5, rather than changing after 30 seconds or 60 seconds, stays there for, 5, 6, 7 minutes, the same number of people. I'm getting used to it now, but it is odd. I can definitely say that it's odd. But there is some interesting pilgrimage experience for me, and perhaps for all of us, from that. Obviously people stop watching, and I don't know really how many people watch, but I do get comments and likes on the Facebook page, and I do get messages. So I am aware that people are them. And one of the favourite ones I had, which is a few weeks ago now, I was not aware that a particular member of the Evesham congregation was on Facebook at all, or likely to be, but I got a message through to say, thank you, I've started watching your Facebook Lives after the event, and I particularly liked blah, 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 blah. So there is a separate congregation that is Facebook Live. It's not Evesham, it's not Cheltenham. In fact, I'm not really sure where it is. It's out there somewhere. I've even attempted to introduce a little bit of calm into the frantic world of TikTok. Now, you may not know what TikTok is, but this is the thing that the youngsters use, and I mean, teenagers. And it's full of dancing and noise and unbelievable banality and nonsense. But literally hundreds of millions of people sharing stuff. And so I've done a few of these where I've attempted to introduce, because you only have 60 seconds, on TikTok, to try and get some introduction of calm. I now have 30 followers, although I have no idea who they are. But I got one comment back after one of the pieces, which cheered me up. Jez4679, whoever that is. This was a young man, judging by the photograph, but of course that may not be him. Said, just what I needed to hear today, man. Thanks. And there we go. Now, if I never get another response from anything I do on TikTok, I'm happy with that one, because somebody grabbed a little moment there and went, yeah, okay, man, and was decent enough to reply. The thing that is amazing to me about TikTok, because it is so frenetic, I appreciate that most of you here don't participate in the social media, and we are aware of the issues that it brings in our politics and our society. But this is another level of speed and stuff that goes on. I just think it's important that whether it's a message of calm or a message of spiritual connection, that actually it does get out there in some format. And so that's the reason I'm willing to give it a go. And the reason that I like to give it a go, and the Facebook Live reflections that I'm doing on a Thursday, hopefully offering a quiet, prayerful space to those who wish it, is that the pilgrimage inside, the pilgrimage of calm that we know as a community we come together to achieve, is not always available for others. And I feel that it's my job as a minister to the community to see where that pilgrimage can go. Be at peace and simply be. We gather together, yes, on a Sunday, but we also gather in other ways. And really, we're engaged in a series of pilgrimages there. We say that we aim to offer and work with lifelong spiritual development. Well, there's a pilgrimage if ever there was one. Twilight tea that a lot of you go to is arguably a weekly pilgrimage of connection. And the reading group is a flow of connection, yes, but also a challenge, a joint challenge to experience a reading and see what other people think of it. And that group, addressing in a series of readings the issues around Black Lives Matter, invites me back to those questions at the start, where I put those 4 questions to you, where if you are in a story or reading a book, you know, what is literally happening in that story and where are we in the story? What images and stories and songs or metaphors come up for you? In the context of a lot of the reading I've done there, there's a lot of stories that leave me really uncomfortable. What experiences have you had in your own life that come to mind in the context of that reading? We all have experiences of confusion over the concepts of racism and how it affects. But we also have confusion of all those other injustices and difficulties that there are in life. The example that will come to us very soon is the worldwide distribution of vaccines and how we will work with that. It's a real challenge, and it's part of the layers that I see that we have to unpick in ourselves in order to be able to help others unpick them. And then, of course, the final question was, what action am I being called to take? And I'd rather revert to our theme of today of pilgrimage in the pandemic as I come back to the idea of action. One thing I meant to say halfway through, I've annotated it 2 or 3 times in here, and I've come to the third one, I've missed the first 2, was that we've had 45-minute services or thereabouts. But today I'm going to see how much of the prepared material feels right, and therefore we may drift over a little past the 45 minutes. A very simple metaphor from that is, if you are on a pilgrimage, there ain't no timing around it. One just has to go with it. Well, what action are we being called to take? Well, here's some suggestions. One I think you're already aware of, for a combination of the need to protect Kevin's time and also to honour the spirit of the furlough that we've agreed that I'm on. The decision's been made to attend some other services, so a pilgrimage around the country via the internet. And the first of these is happening next week. Cressida will fill you in on the details after the service. But that is an opportunity. This is a new form of pilgrimage. I've given a lot of thought as to how Gloucester Unitarians can gather whenever it is that we get back to whatever it is that happens next. Back to, not the right phrase, but you know what I mean. And I've thought a lot about outside worship. You know, if we gather outside, perhaps when the weather picks up and we're still not comfortable inside, regardless of regulations. So my head had this little gathering in the car park outside Dorothy's flat at the actual home there. And a few of us just gathered in the car park in whatever format, maybe even, you know, drive-in worship. I don't know. I think we have to think about what that means and how it might work. And I shared before some time ago, but didn't follow through, the idea of us starting a chain letter between ourselves. And I was just wondering that now might be the time to get a short reading with those 4 questions I've talked about today, and we post that letter on round the congregation until it arrives back with me, and then I have a whole wealth of material to look at and share with you at some other point. That's a very different type of pilgrimage. And to conclude today, I'm going to just share very briefly the conclusions from a book that I've been using at Touching the Spirit, The Power of Ritual, Turning Everyday Activities into Soulful Practices. Because part of my pilgrimage, now that people are coming to more than one thing and there's now things available on Facebook Live that people might see, is everything's coming together in terms of what I do. And in that book, in the conclusion, it says things like, develop yourself a rule of life. A rule of life is a strong Christian statement from the Benedict tradition, but it asks you to look at a form of spirituality in your life. It invites you to commitment. How can you commit to something? It might be a daily ritual. A pilgrimage does require commitment. It invites you into mystery and uncertainty. We have an awful lot of uncertainty, and arguably with the news we have a lot of mystery too. And it invites you to be willing to experience this and just be okay if you can. And if you're not, try another day and then see if you can be okay with the uncertainty and the mystery. But above all, it recognizes the community, and it recognizes that loneliness, difficulty, and vulnerability we all have as individuals. And we all crave a connection, but we need to forever work at that connection to allow it to awaken within us and between us. That links us nicely back to Forest Church at the start, who had us awakening afresh, mysteriously in a cathedral. The spirit of pilgrimage is that willingness to connect and try and awaken. Until we meet again, may we all remain open to the beloved of our hearts.